Hi everyone, thanks for joining us so far. We'll just wait another minute or two for other people to join and then we'll get started. All right, I think we can start now. So thanks everyone for joining us. So this is the Getting Started with E-invoicing from MYOB webinar. So I know a lot of you are new to e-invoicing, so we are very lucky to have Mark Stockwell, who's the Director of e-invoicing from the ATO, joining us today. So he's been involved in the establishment and the adoption of e-invoicing here in Australia. So he is an expert on all things e-invoicing, so we're very lucky to have him to talk to us about what it is and what it means for small businesses as well. We've also got Clinton from MYOB. So he is the digital product manager at MYOB, looking after e-invoicing for small to medium enterprises. So I know we've got a lot of MYOB users here, so he's going to be a great resource to show us how it actually works and what it actually means for you at a practical level when using MYOB. But just a bit of housekeeping first. All attendees will be on mute, but you can ask questions. So there is a Q&A panel just at the bottom of your screen. So if you've got any questions as we go, just hit that, put your question in there, and we'll try and get to that at some stage through the webinar. I know some people put their questions in when you registered, so we'll try and get to them today as well. All right. So Mark, you're the Director of e-invoicing at the ATO. I know e-invoicing is quite a new thing. So can you give us just a quick summary of what e-invoicing is and perhaps even what it isn't, if some people are getting confused?
Sure, probably a good place to start. I'm going to be a very good bureaucrat to start off with, and I'm going to give you a definition, I suppose, to start with, but I'll break that down. So the definition I use is that e-invoicing is an automated, secure exchange of a message between the buyer and supplier's business systems via a network, which we refer to as PEPL. So there's a number of elements in that. You know, it's an automated system. So we're using software. We're not using the general traditional way of dealing with invoices. It's very secure, and I'll break that down later on. It's between both yours and your supply chain partners and their software systems. And those software systems are agnostic in terms of you may be a small business sending to a large business, to government, or vice versa. It's irrelevant to the size and scale of the business. As long as the software is enabled and they're connected to the network, then things will just happen. It's a seamless experience. So that's basically kind of what I term e-invoicing is, and we'll probably break that down through the rest of the webinar, I hope. I suppose the thing I would do, I should explain a little bit more about, probably dismiss some myths about what it is, because often when we talk to groups about what is invoicing, people deny and say, yes, I already do that because I attach my PDF to an email and I send that to my partner, my trading partner. Whereas that's an example of what it's not. So if it's involving email or it's involving PDFs, if you're OCRing, scanning, etc., those sort of traditional ways that people have dealt with invoices in the past, that is not invoicing. Yes, it's probably some degree of efficiency for the different businesses involved with those technologies or products, but that is not what e-invoicing is about. It's about two systems connected using the same standard.
Yeah, perfect. And I guess when I speak to customers about it, because I know it is sometimes a difficult concept to grasp, I sort of liken it to a phone network. You know, you choose a service provider.
Yeah. You
don't worry about what happens when you make that text or you make that call. It just gets to the other person. That's similar with e-invoicing. You put it into your software and it sort of almost magically appears in the recipient software.
Cool. That's a great analogy.
Yeah, and so why, I mean, you work for the ATO. Why is the government so keen to back e-invoicing?
Well, I'm sure some people have seen or heard about the budget announcements each year. In the most recent one, the government released a digital economy strategy. Now this is about making our economy more resilient by many ways, but e-invoicing was seen as one of those key drivers in that strategy to increase productivity for our economy. Obviously, with COVID and other factors, we're taking a bit of a hit at different places within the economy, and they saw e-invoicing as one of the drivers behind increasing the productivity and making ourselves more secure as another element that invoicing brings to the table. So that's at the highest level, and this is about trying to digitise more of business than what they are already digitised. So that brings about greater resilience, brings about ability to connect more seamlessly with their business and trading partners, seamlessly with government into the future. We've already seen, over several years, that transition of business becoming more digitally enabled. And from a government perspective, I look at it and say, well, several years ago, we had SuperStream for employers where they started to send through some superannuation information. Then we had STP, which was more payroll type of information to help them. And more recently, you'd even classify JobKeeper, where people have had to import data into a system for government to actually get a great outcome, which JobKeeper was. So, these things are connected and enable better services from the government, but also about helping businesses be more resilient.
Yeah,
sorry to interrupt. There's another point I suppose I wanted to make around that productivity. I just recall was that trying to give a sense of scale to this is invoices happen in most businesses. I won't say all, but say that happen in most businesses. So we know we've got over 1 billion invoices that are transacted on each year. Now with COVID, we don't know what that number exact is, but let's call it $1 billion. When you multiply that out by about $20 saving per invoice on average, it is an enormous amount of productivity benefit. And that's why the government is really keen to inject that savings or that cost saving into the economy to make them benefit from that. The other factor in Australia over several years has been about our ability to pay or not pay on time. So again, this process and system creating greater efficiency means that people can process more quickly, and ultimately we're hoping that would then mean they would pay more quickly as well. And actually then that brings that the second part of the productivity benefit in is the cash flow. So if we can get that cash flowing for business, it's going to make another factor of making them more resilient. We have over $20 billion worth of unpaid invoices at any one point in time. So it is an enormous amount of money that we want to land in the business accounts. So again, that can be used to pay bills, credits, but also grow their business. So that's probably really some of the more bigger issues behind this push for e-invoicing by the government.
Yeah, and two really interesting points that you make there, and I know a lot of the people who have joined us today are accountants, bookkeepers, in the finance team. So money talks. And I know that the statistic you mentioned there about a $20 cost saving when you move to e-invoicing, that's on the back of some research that I know the ATO did that said that processing a regular invoice, the manual way, can cost you around $30. An e-invoice costs just under $10 to process. So that's where you see the real cost saving there, and you multiply that by the number of e-invoices you send and receive each month, and it's sort of, it's pretty clear where that business case comes in. Another point that you mentioned there was about the payment times and the cash flow issue. And I know the Commonwealth Government has mandated the 5-day payment terms. So for suppliers to the Commonwealth Government with contracts under $1 million, they are guaranteed to be paid within 5 days if they issue an e-invoice to the government. So that's another incentive there. Yep. So, I mean, we've talked about some of the reasons why government is backing it. Why, we've got a lot of small businesses here. Why should they get on board?
Sure. On that, sorry, before I answer that one, I just want to provide some more context, I suppose, to that saving of $20, because that gets raised quite a bit about as cost saving. Now, some businesses say to me, well, I don't actually pay anyone to do it. So it's not actually a cost. I bear the cost myself. I'm a small business. I run everything myself. Therefore, I'm not saving anything. But what I would say to them, what you're saving is time, because all that manual work that you're doing, which I'll talk about shortly, is saving you time. What we've modeled is that on the average business will save over a week of administrative time per annum. So each of those small business people are getting back a week into their life per year. So that's not a small amount of time that they get back to, discretionary time that they can actually use for business reasons, family reasons, etc. So I kind of just want to make that point that if agents are getting that pushback from clients saying, well, I don't actually spend money on that. Well, you mightn't spend money, but you spend time. So think about that. Thanks for the question about how do businesses start using it. What I would say firstly is about the traditional way we do things is very manually based, and a lot of small businesses are caught in that manual paradigm, and they find it hard to move out of common processes they always use. They mightn't have very sophisticated or any software that they actually use within their business. So they just find that a barrier. It's too hard to actually make the shift. But as most agents know, I'm sure you're agitating for people to move into that more digitized world so that it can make their life easier, can make your life easier, and we see better decisions made with the benefit of information. So, if invoicing is trying to remove some of those barriers. So some of those barriers I would call out is, the processing and irritants that they receive when they're trying to get a correct invoice received or even sent, getting away from that lost time through if an error is made when a manual entry was done incorrectly, or maybe the invoice is lost in the inbox. All that follow-up time is time wasted. The time to take to even simply create an email, do a PDF of the document, attach that. Little things like that, they all add up when the business is busy trying to run their service or products. So those are the main manual factors. The other one I would call out, I touched on before, is about any place or any location. We know that a lot of businesses are starting to move into international trade and might be just getting the supply of goods which they can on-sell or to reuse in their products they might build. The standard we've adopted, PEPL, is an international standard. So it's actually used in many places around the world. Over nearly 40 countries now have, particularly a lot of European countries have the set standard so people can transact seamlessly with trading partners in Europe. On the Asia Pacific area, New Zealand, obviously we've partnered closely with them to have that Trans-Tasman relationship in place. Similarly, Singapore is also live. So we're able to transact through Singapore. I've just been talking in the last couple of weeks with Malaysia, Philippines, and Japan. Two of them are actually going to be live later this year. So the Asia Pacific area is now growing the interoperability between trading partners in these countries. So as you can see, it is a growing network and will continue to grow quite rapidly going forward. Other point I'd say why I would urge people to think about e-invoicing over the current way would be thinking about there's an environmental factor. You're using less energy, using a paperless type of operation. But what that paperless operation also gives you, thinking about today's environment with COVID and a lot of staff and people having to work from home, is that where you may be reliant upon office hardware or infrastructure, maybe printers and scanners and things like that, that might be easily transportable to your home, you can still do your invoicing from your laptop or from your PC at home without having the reliance upon some of that hardware. So that's another advantage. The last one I'd talk about would just be what it gives back to you in terms of better records. So I'm sure the agents out there would certainly value that having clients that have got good, tidy records, digital records, would actually you can actually use and assist those clients with getting better business processes in place. I kind of look at the agents and say, well, you're the enablers to the business. And someone coined the terminology of being a digital coach. I kind of see that, yeah, agents are moving away from doing that real basic, won't say basic, but those compliance type, repetitious type of activities around compliance to being more of advisory, being a digital coach, helping businesses with their processes, with their record keeping, cash flow, all those advisory services that small business value.
Yeah, really good reasons to get on board. Now, a couple of things that you mentioned in there is about the record keeping. And I know one of the questions that we did have come in with the registrations is if people or businesses start to issue e-invoices, does that mean that they no longer need to keep hard copies, or what is the ATO stance on that?
No, we have a policy on digital. Obviously, it's been around for a little while. So we've got a record keeping policy, which is on the website, that we accept, the images, as long as it's kept in a secure digital storage. We're happy with people. You don't have to keep hard copies. Again, it goes back to that paperless operation. I mentioned before, not having to keep copies at home now, rather than, as well as in the office. Digital is more than satisfactory.
Perfect. Okay. And you mentioned New Zealand in there as well, the interoperability between Australia and New Zealand. So I know we might have some businesses from New Zealand on the webinar as well. So just to make it clear, it is PEPAL e-invoicing is interoperable with Australia and New Zealand. Yep. So if you're an Australian business, you can issue e-invoices in the same way to New Zealand businesses as you can to Australian businesses, and vice versa. So if you're in New Zealand, you can issue e-invoices to Australian businesses as well, which is one of the really good things I think we did, or you did, I can't take responsibility, straight up, was that Trans-Tasman agreement. That's, really good initiative there. Now, I know I've had a few businesses ask, on the back of sort of SuperStream and single touch payroll, they're reporting to the government. For e-invoicing, what visibility does the government have over e-invoices that businesses issue?
Good question, and a common question. We have no visibility of the data. So think about it, how it operates in practice. You have a business with their software. They need a access point to connect to that network. You gave that good analogy before about the telecommunications. So you need some way to connect to the network. In this case, it's an access point rather than a mobile phone. That access point then routes the data message or the invoice across to your supplier's access point, the other mobile phone, and then it gets ingested into their software systems. Nowhere along that line does the ATO have any connections. We don't have any infrastructure that enables us to actually capture, see, or anything to do with the data exchange. Secondly, we don't have any policy or legislation either that allows us to actually see that. All we've got is some legislation that allows us to govern that network, meaning those access points that move the data around in the network, we govern to make sure that those access points are of the highest capability, security, timeliness, and things like that. So, but again, that's a governance role. We don't actually physically see anything in the system.
Yeah, and I guess just for context here as well, MessageXchange is an access point, so we are the service provider, and I can vouch to that. So the sort of governments that the ATO or the PEPAL authority here have over the access points is to make sure that we're secure, make sure we meet the requirements, make sure we can connect to other access points, make sure we can get the invoice data across to your recipient correctly. So it's those sort of things that they govern. They don't actually see the content or what you're sending through the network. We've had another question come in. Is e-invoicing compulsory, and how does that work?
No, it's not. So the government, when they looked at e-invoicing and the standard, we looked at it from a productivity basis. The government didn't see a compliance need for e-invoicing, but they certainly saw the productivity benefit that it can bring to the economy. And that's really the position behind our current policy, is to drive productivity. So, this is like everything. The government's always looking at ways to assist business, government, etc., to be more efficient, etc. They're doing further consultation on this. We'll continue to do that, researching the market. But at this point in time, there's no decision by government to mandate. Sorry, there is a point there. In terms of government, we as a government agency have to be able to receive invoices from our suppliers. In doing so, what we're trying to demonstrate here is that how easy and simple it is for medium and large business who are comparable to a large government agency. If I take this technology on board, I can process more efficiently, and I can actually then do something really incredible, like I'll pay you in 5 days. So that's our incentive to government suppliers, is that if you send us an e-invoice, we will pay you in 5 days. I think that's a fantastic incentive for people, and it demonstrates really clearly how efficient the system can be, and also I think provides a bit of a benchmark for business in Australia to actually look at what you can do with technology, but what you can do to actually help the economy by adopting and using it as designed.
Yeah, that's right. So I know a lot of government agencies have already gotten on board, because I think there are a couple of mandate dates depending on the size of the agency.
Yep.
So for anyone here who is a supplier to government, definitely look into, and we'll send you some emails after this as well, but look into whether they can receive e-invoices now, because there is that added benefit of being potentially paid in 5 days. So that's definitely one reason to get on board. And it is quite a seamless implementation approach, as you'll see later. So I know the ATO is a customer of ours. A lot of New South Wales government departments are customers of ours. In New Zealand, MB, New Zealand Inland Revenue. So they're just some of the agencies who are on board, and more are coming on as we speak as well. Another question that we did get through is, will e-invoicing eliminate the need for OCR and document storing apps?
I'll say no is the answer I'll start with. The reason for that is because there's no mandate for e-invoicing, so everyone doesn't have to do it on a due date. It's a voluntary process. And so we will see business clients and their supply chain come on board, adopt at different stages, depending where they are in probably their digital maturity and when the software is available for them to actually start sending. So for that reason, you will always probably need, depending on your suppliers, of course, or your trading partners, some degree of OCR for those manual ones that will still come in. Sorry, when I say manual, so PDFs and things like that. When they're still coming through, yes, you'll have a dual channel running the electronic invoices, but you'll need that dual channel whilst you're still receiving the hard copies. And that's why you need to plan out that transition with your suppliers. It's not just simply turning on and it all happens. Part of it is actually communicating with your supply chain to actually let them know that you're now shifting to e-invoicing, or you receive e-invoices, so that they also can actually get the benefits at their end because of the efficiency as well.
Yeah, good answer there. So just a reminder, we do have a Q&A and chat panels there. So if you've got any questions, please send them through and we can try and get to them. Now, I know a lot of you, as I mentioned before, use MYOB and are keen to see how it actually works. So I know, Clinton, your team at MYOB have really been working on the product there to incorporate e-invoicing into that. I've shown it myself, and it's really simple to get set up and to start issuing e-invoices. MessageXchange, obviously, as an access point provider, we also offer the ability to receive e-invoices directly into your in-tray, which is another thing that Clinton will show you today. So we cater for both accounts payable and accounts receivable. So Clinton, shall I throw to you?
Yeah, no, thanks. And it's great to be here. E-invoicing is something that I am pretty passionate about, and it's been something that I've been working on with my team for many months now at MYOB. So let me share my screen and I can show you what we've been up to. All right, so you should be able to see Lily's flowers. Can you see that right now, Ellen?
Yep, I can see it.
All right, so let's maybe move this out of the way. All right. Okay, so what you're seeing now is the browser interface for our small business software. And so that is MYOB Essentials and MYOB Account Write. And what I'm going to be covering in our small business software is I'll be demoing how you can sign up to e-invoicing, and then how you can also go ahead and send an e-invoice. You can track, I'll show you how you can actually track that e-invoice as it flows through your customer's software. And then I'll also show you how an e-invoice is received into MYOB on the accounts payable side. So the first thing we need to go and do is to sign up. And that's just done here from our settings dashboard on this e-invoicing tab. And when I go ahead and click that sign up button, here are the 3 access points that we have partnered with. In this case, obviously, I'm going to select MessageXchange, and I can now read up a bit about what MessageXchange invoicing solution offers to you, and obviously all those great benefits that Mark has just covered. And you also see in the case of MessageXchange that they offer more than just invoicing. They offer EDI capabilities as well to your big retail customers, for example. So in this case, I want to go ahead and sign up for this, for MessageXchange. I click on that green button there, and I get presented with this sign up screen. And it's on the screen that I now need to just authorize MessageXchange to access my business, my software. And here you can see these are all the businesses that I've got access to under my MYOB account. And Lily's Flowers is the one that I want to sign up with. And when I go ahead and click save, then I just get presented with a very quick sign up form. And that's all I need to do to sign up, is just complete this form. So it's basic details. And obviously the company here is Lily's Flowers. Very important is the ABN, because that is what controls and determines how an invoice is routed between businesses. So I need to capture that. And obviously in this case, as Ellen mentioned, MessageXchange provide the ability for me to receive an invoice into my software. And so I certainly want to tick that box there. And I fill in some of my billing information, and MessageXchange have got a great promotion on where the invoicing is free all the way up until the end of the year. So you've got a really good extended amount of time to sign up and test it out. And that's it. I click on register, and I'm now signed up. So really, really painless, and like within 2 minutes, I'm signed up. Okay, so that is the sign up process. Let's go ahead now and send our first invoice. Now, the customer that I'm going to be sending my invoice to is called eVision. And let me just pull up their contact record here in MYOB. So here we go, eVision. They've obviously told me that they can receive e-invoices. And so the very important piece of information to capture in their contract record is the ABN, because without this ABN, I will not be able to send them an e-invoice. The great thing is that the software does actually do a real-time lookup to the business register and is validating the status of this ABN is valid, and in fact, this business is currently registered. So that's great. Likewise, just as important, I need to make sure that I'm capturing my business's ABN, which I do in the business settings for Clint's Camping in this case. So I've done that, so that's good. And now I can go ahead and create that invoice. And that's done the exact same way you create a normal traditional invoice. So let me go and click the invoice icon there. Okay, so this is, I'm sure many of you who are familiar with MYOB recognize the screen. It's just your invoice screen. Obviously, I'm going to select eVision over here as the customer. And when I do that, you'll notice, again, we are just doing that check, the real-time check to the business register, making sure that this ABN that I had captured in that contract record is still valid. The status of this business is active. So that's important, and I can check that without leaving the software. Okay, so if my customer had provided a purchase order number, then obviously I would capture that there in the purchase order number field, and the due date is all fine. I'm just sort of calling out some of this information because I want to show you that on the receiving side. This is invoice number 41. In this case, I am supplying some items or some services to eVision, and that is, in this case, I'm a camping business. I'm supplying them some gas canisters, and maybe they are purchasing 20 gas canisters, and maybe they also want some portable showers. So why not send them some portable showers? Okay. And I'll enter in a little note here, and that's it. So the amount there's 2,200. You'll notice at the bottom of the screen, next to that email invoice button, I've got a new send e-invoice button. And obviously that's what I'm going to be clicking now. And when I do that, I get presented with this screen, which allows me to just do a quick review of the information, as well as attach supporting documentation. Now, so I'm attaching these supporting documents to the e-invoice itself, and that could be things like timesheets to accompany the invoice, or it could be my customer's purchase order that I may want to attach to the invoice. So in this case, I'm going to browse and select this timesheet attachment. You also notice here at the top, we mentioned that a PDF of this invoice will also be automatically attached and sent along with the e-invoice. And in fact, I could preview what that looks like just using this button over here. So your customer will still get the PDF copy if they want it, which may help with the, as people get used to e-invoicing. And I see that in the future will probably no longer be necessary, but maybe in the early days, a lot of customers will still ask for that. So we send that automatically. And that's it. Then I click on the send e-invoice button. And what happens now is this invoice will get sent through to MessageXchange, through the secure PayPal network, and straight into the financial system of eVision. And in fact, eVision have told me that they use MYOB as well. And so I'll be able to show you the experience on their end. But there's no sending of emails, writing up emails, none of that. It's just clicking the send button and it's gone. And here in my invoice list, you'll see there is that invoice 41. It's an e-invoice. I can actually filter out invoices versus traditional invoices if I wanted. But there's the details, and that has been sent. All right. Now, in terms of this, actually, this is a good time to call out this activity column here, because this allows me to track it's only available for, this function is only available for e-invoices, because one of the great benefits of e-invoicing is that I can actually track the invoice as it flows through my customer's financial system, provided they support this functionality, provided they're sending me back these invoice statuses. Now you'll see some of my customers, their systems have done that. For example, John Doe, like this particular invoice, they've conditionally accepted. This particular invoice 31 has been paid. Further down here, I think I've got an acknowledged. So this is versus partially paid. So some of these are automatically triggered statuses, like acknowledged, and others are triggered by the user, where they need to do something in their software to mark the status. So these are official. There's a list of officially supported. There's about 8 PEPL statuses, and that's what makes the interoperability work so well, is because all the systems have got these 8 statuses to deal with, and there's no more than that. Obviously, most important is the rejected status, right? I'll really want to know if my customer has rejected my invoice for whatever reason. And if I drill into that, now I was having problems with this earlier. I think they're working on it, but let's just see if this takes a few seconds to load. If not, I have backup. All right, so yeah, it still looks like it's struggling there. So what happens is, what this is showing me is more information about that rejected status here in the activity history of the invoice. So if I just pull a screenshot of that, and maybe I'll just zoom in here. So what you would see in that activity history is, here's the activity status, right? Is rejected, is one of those PEPL statuses. And the reason that my customer has rejected the status, they've selected the fact that the item quantity that I sent them is insufficient. Again, that's one of the standard PEPL reasons for rejected. And then here is some free text that they've added in on their side, which is now flown through to MYOB. So what they're saying is they've ordered 10 red balloons and they only received 5 balloons. So they could have paid for, partially paid for the invoice, and then gone through the credit note process, or they could, in this case, they've just decided to reject the whole invoice. But what's great is that I'm getting that notification right here in the software. I'm not having to, there's no risk of losing that correspondence outside of the product. All right. So what we can do now is jump onto the receiving side. Let us go to eVision now. And here I am in eVision's business. I'm seeing their dashboard here. And when an invoice is received into MYOB, it actually goes into what is called the in tray. And I can see here that I've got 15 documents in my in tray waiting for me to process. Now, I don't know how many of you currently use the in tray, but it is a great way to have your supply bills received straight into your software or your point of sale receipts. And there's various ways, and that's a function that is available today in MYOB. So you can give a unique email address for your business to your supplier, and if they use that email address, then their invoice will go straight into the in tray. Or you could use our Capture mobile app, and when you take a snap of a point of sale receipt, it will automatically then be sent through to the in tray for you to then code up. And so for e-invoicing, we're using the same capability. So let me show you what that looks like. So if I go into the in tray, then this is the list of those various documents, whether they're supply invoices or receipts that have come in. And if you recall that invoice number 41 was the one that Clint's Camping had sent me for 2,200, and I can see that is here already. And when I click on that, then here is the invoice that's been sent. If I go ahead now and create that as a bill, I now want to record this in my ledger. Then I clicked on that create button, and I'm actually going to close the PDF copy because I'm not interested in that right now. I'm interested in all this actual metadata, and this is the power of the e-invoice, right? Everything that is highlighted in blue is what has been pre-filled via the e-invoice. Obviously, it's the header information like invoice number and date, etc. But more importantly, it's also all the transaction lines that have been filled out, the gas canisters, those portable showers, which were very important to me. And in fact, yeah, and so that's the difference with receiving a PDF and manually writing all of this up, or in the case of what we have today with optical character recognition, or OCR, where we've got technology that scans the PDF that comes in and extracts some of the information out of that invoice. Now, the problem is the limitations with OCR, like while that service is very effective, if the invoice is very blurry, well, then the OCR can only go so far. And also the OCR today can't handle multiple transaction lines. And so e-invoicing takes that to the next level. And yes, like if you much better to get the electronic metadata than having to extract that data through OCR technology. What I've also done is I have set up a default expense account for Clint's Camping in my software. And so anything that I purchase from Clint's Camping is for our entertainment, it's for our social events. And yes, that's what it's an interesting social event with the portable showers. We won't go there, but because I've set up that default expense account to entertainment, well, then all these lines have been coded automatically for me. So all I really need to do at this point is to set, if I was purchasing these items and tracking that stock, then I could match that to and code it to my own item. In this case, this is just really a service invoice. So I'm going to just switch to the service layout there. And the only thing we don't extract or pre-fill today is the due date. But so that's something that I need to set. But when we release the full version of e-invoice receiving at the end of the year, that will automatically be pre-filled as well. So this receiving capability that I'm showing you now is available in early access, and it's great that MessageXchange has made this available like very, very early on, so you can get cracking on this right away. Okay, so I can now go ahead and hit the save button, and you'll see that this is obviously now recording this bill in my own ledger. And so when I do that, then if I go to my bills list, by the way, it gets, yeah, if I go to the bills list now, you'll see, just click on that. And there is that bill number 8, which I just created. And that is really the experience on the receiving side. So just to cover a recap of what I showed is, first up, I showed how to sign up for e-invoicing. Took 2 minutes. Then how to send an e-invoice, which, yeah, it's almost a bit underwhelming, right? Like how simple it is. And then how to track the e-invoice in your customer's software as it flows through those different stages. And then lastly, I showed you how the invoice is actually received into the in-tray, how all of that data is pre-filled, and then it's just a matter of hitting that record button and your supplier invoice has been recorded in the ledger. Yeah, so that's it.
Perfect. Thanks so much for that, Clinton. As I think everyone saw, it's just so simple to do. Really, the process of you issuing an invoice doesn't change with e-invoicing. I mean, you saw what Clinton did. He uses the same page in MYOB. It's literally just clicking that different button, which is the change, and that will determine how the e-invoice gets to the recipient, to your customer. I know we've got a couple of questions that have come through. So firstly, just to cover up as well, how do you, or what identifier is you? So we use the analogy of a phone network before. Your phone number is obviously the number that people call. In e-invoicing, it's either the ABN, the NZBN. So predominantly that's going to be used. In some cases as well, if a business has a GLN, which is a global location number, that can be used as well. So usually in Australia and New Zealand, it starts with 9394. If you're in the sort of supply chain space, you might know and issue or sell products to retailers, you might have a GLN as well.
And that's a good point, Ellen. I didn't actually mention it, but what I was demoing today was the Australian version of MYOB. In the case of the New Zealand version of our software, that experience that you saw both the sign up, sending, receiving, it's identical. The only difference is NZBN versus ABN. So that's the only difference you'll see on the screen.
Yeah, cool. We had some other questions come in as well, so I'm just looking through them. Some were about the service layout versus the layout that you use. E-invoicing can actually be used for services as well. So really it's the same process, Clinton. You just change it on when you're actually creating the invoice. Is that correct?
Correct, yeah. So I could have kept that invoice that I received. First of all, when sending an invoice, it can be using the item layout or the service layout. Makes the difference. And then likewise, when receiving it, I was just purchasing a service. I didn't need to code those line items to my own items or item codes. So I just switched to the service layout, which was simpler. And yeah, so absolutely supports both.
Cool. Another question was, when receiving an e-invoice, would the invoice be attached to the transaction as well?
Yes, so that's what I was showing in that sending process. Is if you recall, when I attached, when I hit that send button, the little modal popped up, and there was a little comment there that said, yes, we are automatically attaching a PDF copy of the invoice, and so yes, that we're just doing that in the early days of e-invoicing. Eventually, I think though that customers, once they become more familiar with e-invoicing, won't need the PDF anymore, and that'll just be the data being exchanged. But for now, yeah, we automatically attach a copy of the PDF.
Yeah, cool. Another question that came through was, how do we know when to send a normal invoice versus an e-invoice? And I think we had a similar one phrased just a little bit differently. So if you so at the moment, if you register for e-invoicing in MYOB, you can send an e-invoice as your access point. So MessageXchange will look up whether your customer can receive e-invoices. If not, we will send a message to you to let you know that you can't. But also prior to that, I think we had another question come through. How do you know if your customers can receive e-invoices? So firstly, obviously you can ask them. If you are issuing e-invoices or invoices to a government customer, I would definitely suggest asking them, because I think the likelihood is they either can or will soon be able to receive e-invoices. Alternatively, and I'll send you this link afterwards, there is actually a website that you can go to enter your customer's ABN to see if they can actually receive e-invoices. Apart from that, I do suggest contacting them and asking them. I know there are a number of businesses getting on board now. Or if they're using MYOB as well, I mean, you've seen how easy it is to get set up, and it is free at the moment. So I would suggest asking your customers to get on board. Also your suppliers, because you've seen receiving e-invoices to your in-tray, how much easier that's going to be. You don't actually have to enter anything. All of the line item data is there for you. Looking through some of the other questions. Do both buyer and seller have to be signed up to MessageXchange, or can they be signed up to a different software? Yes, they can be signed up to a different software. So it's just like the phone analogy. So I could be using Telstra. If I call Clinton, he could be using Optus, and it doesn't matter. It is an interoperable network. So the access points, as in the service providers, talk to each other. But it doesn't matter what service provider your customer is using, the e-invoice will get. And then we've got some questions about the statuses and approvals. That's probably more of an MYOB question, Clinton. So about approvals being added to the in-tray.
Yep, so we don't have approvals today, but we have plans to improve the in-tray. Like, we have a lot of customers who have asked for that workflow approval, and it's something that we are definitely looking to build out in the future. And even more so with the advent of e-invoicing and the increase in usage of e-invoicing, that approval workflow becomes even more important. And so yes, like while we don't have it today, definitely something we'll be looking at going forward.
Cool. Another question probably for you as well, Clinton. What is the difference between regular issued invoices that are sent to customers or suppliers by email through MYOB and e-invoices?
So the key difference there is that when emailing an invoice today, that is emailing a PDF of that version of that invoice. And then when your customer receives that PDF, they have to manually type that up into their software or use expensive like OCR software to try and extract, to automatically extract some of that data. The beauty with an e-invoice sent through the Peppol network, which is what MessageXchange is doing, is that you're sending all the metadata of that invoice. So all the header information, all the transaction lines as data, as structured data, and your customer's software that they support receiving a Peppol invoice. And so when that invoice hits their software, their software within their accounts payable is able to read all of that metadata into and then display that e-invoice in their software. So the processing time and processing cost for your customer is vastly reduced. They're able to process your invoice much faster. They're able to, in the case of, let's say, a government customer, or if your customer is a larger business, they're running an ERP, they would then be able to, their software would be able to automatically do the two-way or the three-way matching to the purchase order, the goods receipt, because that e-invoice is coming through as data. The opportunities for automation are vastly improved. And so their ERP can automatically match the content of the invoice with the purchase order that they had ordered, that created, and then automatically approve it, or mark it for sort of human intervention. And so because they're able to process and therefore process your e-invoice much faster, they're able to pay your e-invoice much faster, and obviously that has huge cash flow benefits for you as a small business. So yeah, like very, very, very different to a PDF.
Yeah, definitely. We do have a couple more questions, but just a reminder, if you have any others, chuck them in the chat. We can try and get to them. Another one for you, Clinton. Will e-invoicing eventually replace the need for MYOB capture, so there will be no need to take a physical photo of an invoice?
So yeah, in the case of an invoice, yes, like you won't need to capture an invoice anymore. In the case of a point of sale receipt, you would probably still be using capture for that for the foreseeable future. But in the case of a supplier invoice, yes, you won't need to capture that anymore, provided, of course, your supplier is sending you that e-invoice rather than their software would need to be able to support e-invoicing, and they would need to send you an invoice. And then yes, if they send you an invoice, no longer need to capture it using the capture app.
Yeah, and it is very early days with e-invoicing. I know the government have been playing a big role in trying to get use of it first. So I think over the next few months, we'll definitely see a lot of bigger businesses get on board, so that range of people who you can send and receive invoices with will increase as well. Some of the questions in here. Someone asked about the credits on MessageXchange, so I guess I can talk to that. So when Clinton signed up before with MessageXchange, he did show the simple sign up page there. I will stress that e-invoicing is free until at least the 1st of January 22, so next year. So you've got a few months to get started and see how it is, see whether you like it. There's absolutely no obligation there. So I suggest as a result of this, go and check it out and see how it works for you. If you don't like it, for whatever reason, there's no obligation to keep going with it. But after that, so from the 1st of January next year, the way that MessageXchange charges for e-invoicing is to subscribe to our access point per annum. So it's a $50 charge. And then each e-invoice you send or receive will consume credit. So that's the $50 amount there to buy a block of credits, and then you draw down on that. So that's how it's charged, but it is free now. So I would definitely take advantage of that because there's no obligation there. All right, I think that's sort of drawing us to the end. I know we're sort of coming to the end now. So I'd like to take this opportunity. Thank you very much, Mark. I know you're very busy and got a lot to do with e-invoicing at the moment. So thank you so much for explaining to everyone what e-invoicing is and what benefits they can see. I think that was really, really helpful. And
thank you.
And Clinton, thanks so much for going through the demo. And I think you just showed how easy it is to get started. And as I said, I can just see more and more people signing up. So that will just mean more and more people you can send and receive invoices with. So thanks again for that, Clinton. Thanks for your time.
Pleasure.
Cool. So I mentioned a few things in there. I'll send you an email, everyone, after this with the link to get lookup, so you can see who of your trading partners can receive e-invoices at the moment. On to anyone else to let them know how to get started as well. If you have any questions, just respond to the email that I send you, and I will be in touch. So thanks again for everyone for joining us.
Bye.
Bye.